Hey, Phil Kurth here, and in this video I want to introduce you to my WP Tailwind CSS theme boilerplate. If you're not familiar with Tailwind CSS, it's something that I highly recommend you check out. It's a really awesome utility-first CSS framework that can really help you build UIs very quickly. It's sort of almost entirely, well, it very much can completely cut out the need to write CSS. Like, you could basically just be writing markup, as you can see by this animated demo here. But I mean, it obviously supports your ability to write your own CSS, and you can configure it as well. And yeah, it's just really great. It's basically, it's sort of like a, I don't want to say it's like Bootstrap, but it's kind of like a way better version of things like Bootstrap. The main reason I never really caught on to Bootstrap is because I could always spot a Bootstrap site a mile off, and I've always sort of felt like they were a little bit locked into that sort of library of components, whereas with something like Tailwind CSS, you could go and build your own Bootstrap component library and then go and use that on any number of sites. So it's a really fantastic tool, and it's got some really fantastic docs. So you can just come here and you can do some really quick Algolia-based searching to find exactly what you need, and it loads quickly, and the references are all there, so it's fantastic. So so what I'm going to do is close that, and basically what I've done is I've decided I'm pretty much going to use this on every theme I build. Every new theme I build from here on out, I'm going to use Tailwind CSS because it's just offered me this much power and flexibility. So that prompted me to create this theme boilerplate, which I'm just happy to share. So this is it's more or less a very minimalist boilerplate, and it just has the bare essentials to get up and running with Tailwind CSS, and from there I can kind of build whatever theme I need. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to go through the installation process and just show you how you can get up and running with this. And I'm going to walk you through what's in this theme. So there is a README here with a getting started guide, and there is a command reference and a few notes about versioned assets and purge CSS. But I'll talk you through that in the video as well. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to grab the URL to this repository here, and over here I've got a WordPress installation, and I don't have a theme in there yet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cd into WP content themes, and I'm going to say git clone this repository into my demo theme. Okay, so that's cloned, so I'm going to cd into my demo theme, and then what I'm going to do next is I'm going to run npm install. Okay. And this is going to install that, black hole of packages that do a whole bunch of stuff for us that we don't have to do. And it's going to basically make it possible to use Tailwind and do the compiling and whatnot that we need. Here we go. Cool, so that's installed. So if I come over here to my editor now, I'll come down to themes. Here's my theme here. We've got a lot of stuff in here. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to take this local example.json, and we're going to copy it to local.json. And what we want to do is we want to change this proxy value to our local development domain. So we've got this here. Oops. And what we're going to do here is change this like so. And what this does is this allows we're using browser sync in this, right? And this basically tells browser sync to proxy this domain. Okay, so I wouldn't recommend committing this to your repository. This stays local so that anyone can be working on this theme under a different local domain. It might be localhost with a port number. It might be, I'm using Valet, so I'm using like this kind of format here. But anybody can have their own local domain configured using this file. All right, so we've done that. And what we're also going to do now is I'm just going to do a search and replace. I'll go through this file in a second, but I'm going to copy this namespace here, and I'm going to do a search and replace across the entire theme. Actually, let's go with this. Yep. And I'm just going to change it to my theme demo. What we're doing here is we're changing the PHP namespace. So I've got some classes in there, and I've got an autoloader, and what we want to do is give it a unique namespace that is relevant to the theme. Okay, so I'm just doing that now. There's not a whole lot that needs changing, but this just ensures that the namespace on your theme and the classes in your theme have a unique namespace. So if you happen to be using a child theme or something, or if you child theme this, well, if you're basically using this alongside other themes and you have the same namespace, you can have, you can cause some issues for yourself, right? Because you're gonna, yeah, it doesn't matter. Just replace it. It's fine. All right, so we've done that, and what we're going to do now is we're going to go to our style.css, and I'm just going to replace the theme name in here to my demo theme. Okay, you can replace all the other stuff. I'm just going to leave it for now. That's fine. All right, and then what we need to do is activate our theme. Okay, so you can do this via the WordPress admin, obviously, or you can do it via WP CLI. So I'm going to say theme list. Cool, my demo theme, that's what we want to activate. So WP theme activate. Awesome. All right, now, so if I come over here to appearance themes, just to double check it, my demo theme is active, and if I hit the front end, awesome. All right, so it's basically loading just a basic, some hard-coded demo content in there. Now, it's unstyled because we haven't built any styles yet, but if I come back over to my command line, and I'm still in my theme directory, if I go and run npm run webpack, what this is going to do, it's going to basically build the development version of our assets. Okay, and I say the development version because we've got some processes here. We've got the ability to build dev versions, which gives us the entire library of Tailwind CSS utility classes in our CSS file. And then we've got the ability to run a production build, which runs a very, very, very stripped back version of the CSS, right? It just gives us the essentials. And I'll illustrate this right now. So you can see that our CSS file here in the development version is 913 kilobytes, which is huge, right? You wouldn't want to ship that because that's slow. It's going to be slow. But if we were to run npm run prod, what happens is we've got purge CSS set up. It basically looks at all the template files in your theme. It works out exactly what CSS classes are needed, and it goes and creates, or it goes and rips out anything from the CSS that it doesn't need. Okay, and so the CSS file here for production is now 5.41 kilobytes, which is tiny. All right, that's fantastic. That's great, and you can see the difference there between development and production is huge. Okay, that's going to have a major speed advantage on your site. Okay, so that's just basically a quick look, I guess, at the build process. But let's jump into the theme, because you're probably more familiar right now with theme development, right? And what we'll do is we'll start here at functions, and so I basically just want to show you a few things about this theme so you get a quick understanding of how this all works. So in the functions.php file, I'm setting up an autoloader here. So this is a PSR4 based autoloader, Google PSR4 if you don't know what that means. But basically what that means is in this app directory, you can have any number of classes, and you can also have them under any number of directories. So you might have, I don't know, like whatever, let's just call it utils. You might have a directory called utils. You might have a bunch of classes inside there. So you might have, let's say you have an array class, and the namespace is my theme demo, whoops, /utils. Oh my god, what just happened? All right, here we go. New class. Because I named it array, that's why. My theme demo /utils. Okay, so basically this class has a namespace of my theme demo /utils, and it's in the utils directory. So we don't ever have to include this in our application. We could just go and use it. Like if we had it, we could say array, blah, blah, blah. We don't have any methods in there, but the app's going to know to autoload that. So that's what the autoloader does. It just makes it easy to go and create classes as you need them, and not have to include them anywhere. That was probably a longer explanation on autoloading than I needed to give. But anyway, look, let's move on to the view class. I've got this view class in here. It's a utility. Basically, you probably don't ever really need to look at it. You can if you want to, but all you need to do is call it up and give it a base directory for where your views are going to live. And I've got a views directory inside the templates directory. And so now whenever I use this view class to grab a view and feed it data, it's going to know exactly where to look. And to get a quick example of that, if we look at our index.php file, we're calling a partial here. So we're calling templates partials example. And if I open that file down here it's calling a view. It's saying view render example view. And if we look in views, we've got example view. Okay, so it's rendering example view and it's feeding some data. And you can spend some time digging into this if you want. The views, like if you want a quick explanation of views versus partials, views have no real context. Okay, so I try not to use global variables for WordPress. I try not to use any of WordPress's utility functions or template tags or anything like that. I really just keep these views as dumb as possible. They're just expecting data. And so you can see that in the example partial, I'm calling the example view and I'm feeding it exactly the data that we want to render. And now that we've got our CSS built, if we come over here and reload this page, yeah, we see we get a styled output. Okay, so, and this is basically, I think it's this, what I've got, the who am I? So this section here, there's like a div here, that's a view. I've just for example's sake. Okay. Okay, so that's views. So you can obviously call that anywhere you want. You can create any views you like. You can create them in subdirectories if you want, and you can you just render them like this example here. All right. Yeah. All right. Cool. So the next part of functions.php, so we're including our scripts and styles include. So I come to includes, and we've got this here. All it is hooking into onQ scripts, and it's registering one CSS file and one JavaScript file, and then onQing them. But you'll notice there is an asset resolver class which is resolving these files. Now the reason that's doing that is because when you do a development build, the file names are just going to be app.css. But when you do a production build, there's going to be a version in the file name. So if we have a look, not at assets, but at build. So if we look at CSS, okay, so we've got our development version here, which if we open it up is going to be pretty big, like that's massive, okay. But if we look at our production version, it's got this version hash in the file name, okay, and this just ensures unique file names so that whenever we deploy, it's going to basically force the browser to load the latest version of that file. But I mean, can you imagine trying to change that in here every time? What this asset resolver does is it uses this mix manifest, which is generated as part of the build, and it just has a referencing system that says, hey, we want to load app.js, so this is the actual file name we need. All right, so we don't need to talk much about this. This is just handling stuff for you that you don't really need to worry about. Okay, and just to quickly point out, so we did our prod build. If we now have a look here, like we look at our prod CSS, it's actually really small compared to our dev CSS, and which we saw that in the file size. Okay, so obviously functions.php file, go and put whatever you want in here. That's used as you normally would. And the next thing we should probably take a really quick look at is the index.php. All right, so I've just got header, footer, template part, which we've already had a quick squeeze at. If I open the template part, you'll see that you can basically get a look at some of the utility classes in action here. So there's BG Blue 100, fixed, flex, inset 0, item center, all that sort of stuff. That's all Tailwind CSS, and like Tailwind CSS is incredibly flexible. Okay, and you can just really quickly write out UIs with this sort of stuff. So yeah, so that's got a quick look at the template. Scripts and styles we've already checked out. So the other thing we'll touch on is we've got these files in the theme. Let me just close these directories here. So we've got these files in the theme here. We've got tailwind.js, okay, and we've got tailwind example.js. Now, Tailwind example.js is not used. It's just there purely as a reference. I build it out just so I can basically have something to look at, right? So you can go in here and you can see all this is essentially Tailwind's config. Okay, so it uses all this sort of stuff here to build out the CSS file that gets loaded to the site. So in the tailwind.js file, this is where our custom config goes. And you can learn all about this on tailwind.css, but you can see here that I'm basically, to give you a really quick understanding, I am setting container padding, okay, and I am extending some of the Tailwind, so in Tailwind example, so you've got theme and you've got colors, for example, right? So they've got all these color options. I'm extending those colors and adding my own things. So I'm just adding this link default, link hover type things. I'm also adding a font size that I use a bit, and then I'm adding a line height reference as well. Okay, and then I'm also setting up variants. I'm not going to go into detail about these, but these are things that you can spend time on the Tailwind CSS website and learn more about. But you can also add your own utility classes via Tailwind, which I've got this translate x half, which I use a lot. So Tailwind.js is where you'll write your custom Tailwind config, okay? And again, learn about that from the Tailwind website. And the other file I think we should look at is this Webpack file. I know this video's gone on for a while, so I'm trying to kind of speak fast, but still make sense. But this Webpack.mix file, this is basically telling Laravel Mix or what to do, well, how to run. Okay, so we're using Laravel Mix to build our assets. Don't worry about the name Laravel in it. It's basically just a Webpack wrapper that makes using Webpack really easy. And if you have a look at this config file, if you've ever done any kind of build files with Gulp or Grunt or any of those things, you know how complicated that stuff can get. This is a Laravel Mix file, which is basically a wrapper for Webpack, as I said, and it really simplifies doing like asset builds and things like that, right? So what we've got in here is we've got, or we're configuring Mix a little bit, so we're setting a public path and we're making sure that any references to jQuery don't throw errors in the JavaScript build. We're telling it that it's an external library essentially. because we're loading that up via WordPress. And then we're setting up browser sync. Okay, so that's using the local.proxy reference that we set up in local.json. Okay, and that's so you can go and modify this if you need to. So with any browser sync config you need. We're also using mix.tailwind, so we're calling that via this Laravel mix tailwind component, and then we're telling mix to compile our one JS file and our one SCSS file into a CSS file. So, and you can obviously go and do a whole bunch more with Laravel mix in this file here. The next thing we're doing is we're using mix.purge CSS. All right, so you can set this up, purge CSS a few different ways, but there's this very convenient Laravel mix purge CSS library, which makes it a lot simpler. And I'm just telling it to look for any files, any PHP files in the theme root, and then any PHP files within templates and any JS files as well, because I might be dynamically using Tailwind CSS classes in the JavaScript. And basically it's going to look at all those files, it's going to find the Tailwind CSS classes that are being used, and it's going to use that to build the production version of the CSS. Lastly, it does this check here. It says in production version hash, so that's versioning the file names, and source maps, so it's building source maps. You might wonder why I didn't put the purge CSS in amongst the in production check, and that's because the purge CSS library or utility, whatever you want to call it, or the package, I guess, that already does the check for you. So the purge CSS only runs in the prod build. Okay, so this video is about to hit 20 minutes. I'm going to wrap it up there. That's a really semi-brief intro to my Tailwind CSS theme boilerplate. Use it, break it, let me know what you build with it. If you've got questions or whatnot, you can just hit me up on Twitter, or open an issue if you like. I don't really want to see many of those, but there's probably going to be them there, so that's fine. Yeah, fork it, do whatever you want.